Well, hello and welcome back to session number 2 of Parenting Through the Phases. I'm so excited to be here with you today and our live studio audience to talk about parenting. I'm sure, just like you, I have a lot of hats that I get to wear, but wearing the hat of dad is probably my favorite. And so I'm really excited to talk about parenting with you today, and I'm sure almost all of you are parents as well. And there is a piece of wisdom that we have gained as parents that you can't really gain any other way. And it's this simple truth that parenting is really hard. I'm in conversations with people often about how difficult parenting is, and it's so funny how they're often surprised that, like, hey, I can't do the simple things like go to the bathroom by myself anymore, or just eat a meal like uninterrupted, or one that's just warm. I remember being hit in the face with the reality of parenting right after our oldest son Milo was born. So it was a very long labor process, like 36 hours, and my son was born at midnight. And we get moved up to our longer stay room at 3 in the morning. We're both exhausted. My wife had literally just given birth. I've been awake the entire time and probably haven't eaten in the better part of 26 or 27 hours. And the nurse brings us up to our room, gets us settled in, and then she just left us. And we both kind of looked at each other like, there's a baby here now. How are we supposed to go to bed? The reality is parenting is difficult, and it's one of the biggest adjustments that you'll make in your entire life. And there's lots of reasons that parenting is hard, but I like to say one of the biggest reasons that parenting is difficult is because kids are time travelers. I mean, think about it. When you are holding your newborn in the hospital, and they're cute, and their little nose is just the cutest thing you've ever seen, and every little movement they make is just so precious, you blink, and then you're at their first birthday party. And then you blink again, and you're taking them to preschool. Then you blink again, and they're a middle schooler. Then you blink again, and they're about to graduate. And so maybe to start off this session, the best parenting advice I could give you is maybe just stop blinking altogether. Because in our last session, we talked about the importance of time and how we have to start the countdown to understand that we have a limited number of weeks left with our kids. And when we understand how much time we have left, maybe we'll do a little bit better job of making the most of the time we have now. And so to begin our session today, I want us to wrap our minds around this very simple reality, and that is kids are constantly changing. Your kid is constantly changing, no matter how young or old they are. They're constantly going through changes, and I think we all understand that, but I wonder how many of us are actually paying attention to that on a day-to-day basis. And again, that's not because we're bad parents or because we don't care about the changes they're going through. The reality is that being a parent is not the only thing that we do. Even if you're a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad, being a parent is not the only thing that is competing for your attention. And so sometimes we just miss what we miss. And so today what I want to do is actually equip us with what the phases actually are and how we can leverage the opportunity we have in every single one of those phases. So to begin, I actually want to let you know something very simple, but it's going to be important for this entire session, that every phase has unique potential. You can leverage the influence you have with a 3-year-old differently than you can leverage your influence with a 6th grader. And so we're going to learn today about what those phases offer us. And actually, I want to go ahead and define what a phase is. We've used that term a lot, so let's go ahead and just define what it is. A phase is simply a time frame in a kid's life when you can leverage distinctive opportunities to influence their future. So today, we're going to talk about some of the changes that are happening, and we're going to talk about how we can leverage our opportunity at each phase. Okay, so to begin, you need to know every kid at every phase is asking a question. Again, your parents, you know this. Kids ask a lot of questions. And so at every phase, you need to know that they are asking a question, and then you, as their parent, can answer that question for them. And before we start and I go through all the questions, these are not questions they're actually going to ask. Like, your newborn is not going to ask you a question, which if they do, let somebody know, because they're a medical marvel and we need to study them and research what's going on. Okay, so let's talk about the questions our kids are asking. So if you have a newborn, a toddler, or a preschooler, they are asking what I call a foundational am I question. So imagine for a second you're a newborn. You know no one. You don't speak the language. You can't understand a single thing anyone's saying. You don't know where your next meal is coming from. You don't know if there's going to be somebody there to help you fall back to sleep when you're tired. And so a newborn or an infant is asking the question, am I safe? And our job in that first year of life is very critical, to show up every day to let them know that, yes, they are safe. And then they're going to get a little bit older. They're going to become a toddler. And they're going to be asking the question, am I able? And if you've had a toddler, you know that that's the case. Because when you're late to church or you're late to work or whatever, and they're just insistent that they're going to put their own coat on, even though they don't really know how to do it. It's because they are trying to answer the question, am I able? And they get a little bit older. You blink again, and now they're in preschool. And this is the phase of their life where maybe they start to consciously disobey a little bit more often. And so your role as a parent is to maybe correct or discipline a little more. And so all of a sudden they're like, why am I getting in trouble so much? So their question shifts again to, am I good? Or am I okay? Do all the other kids get in trouble this much? Am I all of a sudden bad? Why am I getting in trouble so much? Why do I have to go to timeout so much? So they ask the question, am I good? And so they get a little bit older and their question shifts from an am I question to a do I have question. And if you've ever hung out with a kindergartner or a first grader, you may be able to guess what their question is. And it is, do I have your attention? It seems like just instinctual for a kid that's in this phase to just start telling you everything and anything about themselves. Like, hey, this morning I had Fruit Loops for breakfast. And you're like, I don't even know your name, but cool. They want to know that they have your attention. And you maybe have seen this play out. If a kindergartner or a first grader thinks that maybe you're not fully paying attention to them, they may move a little bit more into your line of sight. They'll get a little bit louder. They'll get a little bit closer. They'll literally talk to you like right here because they need to know, do I have your attention? And then something interesting happens around second or third grade. And in this phase, they begin to start comparing themselves more to their peers. And so their question shifts to, do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes to get my artwork up on the bulletin board? Do I have what it takes to get into that club or make it on the team or to sing in the choir? Do I have what it takes? And then they get a little bit older. You blink again, which I told you to stop doing. They end up in 4th and 5th grade. And then the question becomes, do I have friends? Friends and peers start to matter on a whole new level at this phase. They actually begin to start looking to their peers to get a better understanding of who they are. So they begin to have the question, do I have friends? Are there people that like me? Are there people around that I can talk to? And then we move out of elementary and we move into everyone's favorite time of life, middle school. And their questions become a little more difficult and a little more abstract. So a 6th grader is asking the question, who do I like? And I don't mean that in terms of like, who's my crush this week? I mean like, who do I like? Who do I like to be around? Which maybe is just a different way of saying, who likes me? Again, we're in the phase of life where they're trying to figure out who they are based on their relationships with their friends. And so they start to ask the question, who likes me? Do people like me? Then they get into 7th grade and they ask a very difficult question. They start to ask the question, who am I? What's my identity? Who am I? And again, they're still relying on their friend group to try and answer that question. And then in 8th grade, they begin to take a little bit more ownership over themselves. They understand that maybe not only can they understand who they are, but they maybe have a little bit of say in who they are. And they start asking the question, who do I want to be? They understand that maybe they have a little bit of sovereignty over themselves to decide, I can choose the kind of person that I want to be. And then we enter into the final 4 years of quote-unquote childhood, the high school years. And a 9th grader asks the question, where do I belong? It's around this age where they have tons of different opportunities. They can be in a million different extracurricular activities at school. They can be a part of a million different friend groups. They can play a million different sports. So they ask the question, where do I belong? In all this stuff, in all these opportunities I have, where do I belong? And then in 10th grade, I want to camp out in 10th grade for a little bit because I think something really special happens in their life. This is the age where most kids get their driver's license, which means a little bit more independence. And usually teenagers, when they get a little taste for independence, they start wanting a lot more of it, which also means maybe they start to push back against your rules a little bit. And their question becomes, why should I believe? which is really just saying, why should I believe you, Mom, about anything? Why should I believe you that that thing you said is really bad? Because I have a friend that did it, and it didn't seem to go so bad. And this is actually a really important step in a kid's life, because what they're actually learning is to think critically about information before they accept it as true. Because you don't want your kid to grow up and just read anything on Facebook or Instagram. Kids don't use Facebook, but whatever the thing is, and just accept it as fact right away. So this is actually a very important skill that they're developing at this age. But the reality of it for us as parents is really frustrating, because they suddenly think they know everything. And I say that to say that when you get to that phase, or if you're in that phase now, have a little bit of extra patience, because they're actually developing a very important skill. And just saying, listen to me because I told you, maybe isn't the best way to help them hone that skill. Then they get a little bit older. They're going to go into 11th grade, and they ask the question, how can I matter? Not sometime off in the distance, not when I'm a grown-up, but right now, how can I matter? And then 12th grade, standing on the edge of adulthood, they ask the question, what will I do? And so when we understand the question that they're asking at any given phase, that actually informs us in how we should parent at that phase. I'll give you an example from my life. So a few months ago, my son Milo had just turned 3. And that means he's in that phase where he's asking the question, am I able? I am living the, hey, we're late to church, but you're going to put your shoes on. They're on the wrong feet. Okay, whatever, we're going. I'm living that right now. And a few months ago, he decided he wanted to get himself dressed. Which is something he doesn't normally do. But this morning, he was just dead set, I'm getting myself dressed. He wanted to go up to his room by himself, take his pajamas off, pick out his own outfit, get himself dressed. And I was like, okay. I immediately thought, he's trying to figure out, am I able? So I'm all about this. Go do it, buddy. You got this. And he's up there for an alarming amount of time. And he comes back downstairs halfway through, and his shirt is stuck over his head, kind of like a crown, And so I help him get it off, and he goes, okay, I'm going back up. And I was not allowed to come up the stairs. He goes, no, you stay down here, Daddy. I'm going to do it myself. And he comes down. He's got socks on. He's got underwear on, which is a plus. He's got shorts on and a shirt. I'm like, buddy, that's awesome. Thing is, every single piece of clothing he has on is backwards, including his underwear. It's backwards. But again, when I understand that he's asking the question right now, am I able? I'm going to celebrate the fact that he, one, picked out clothes that actually matched, by the way, and got them on by himself. If the first thing I had said had been, buddy, they're backwards, I would have been answering the question he's asking with a negative response. That, oh, buddy, you tried, but they're backwards. Who cares if they're backwards? He got clothes on, and he wore his clothes backwards that whole day. We went grocery shopping, who cares? We got weird looks. We went over to my parents, and they're like, your clothes are on backwards. And I was like, yeah, and it's awesome, isn't it? Because I want him to know, yes, he is able. And he's not going to grow up and put his clothes on backwards. He's going to figure that out. But he got himself dressed that day. And so because I understand the question he's asking, I know how to respond in that moment. And so I want to give you just some simple phrases that you can think about for whatever phase your kid is in. So if you are in that beginning phase of life where your kid is asking a foundational am I question, your role is to embrace their physical needs. Embrace the phase of life they're in. Embrace the fact that this is the part of parenting that maybe requires the most physical labor from you. They're not doing anything on their own. They are not eating, they're not getting dressed, they're not going to sleep, they're not doing anything without your help. So embrace that this is the phase of life where they need you in a physical kind of way the most. And what I like to say, maybe you've heard this before, is that in this phase, especially when they're super young, the days are long, but the years are short. Again, every single one of these weeks is going by. Those long days where, you can't get them to take a bottle, or they won't go to sleep, or you've been up for what feels like 3 months. There's going to be a day where you want to put those marbles back in the jar. So while you're in this phase, embrace it and try to make the most of it. And then when they get a little bit older and they enter into the elementary years where they're asking those do I have questions, your role is to engage their interests. Because this is the phase of life where they're kind of starting to figure out, hey, where do I fit into the world? Do I have some friends? Who likes me? Do I have what it takes? So your role as their parent is to engage their interest. And I'm going to give you a little secret. Every elementary age kid has the same interest. And it's the same interest that you and I have. and it's themselves. So get on their level, get into whatever they're into at that phase. Learn about Minecraft or, whatever it is. Sit there and let them tell you about netherite scraps and all this stuff that you have no idea what it means and it might as well be made up. That actually is real Minecraft information, by the way. Feel free to use that. Go ask them, what is netherite scrap? And they'll be like, whoa, you're a genius. Get into their interests. Engage with them in what they're into at whatever age they're at. And then when they enter into the awkward years, the middle school years, your role is very simple but very important. And that is to affirm their personal journey. I've had the privilege and honor of being in youth ministry for several years, and I have never in my life met an overly affirmed middle schooler. So your role in their life right now is to affirm them. And they're going to seem like they don't care about your affirmation. They don't love me, gross. But they actually desire yours more than anyone else's. And so fight through the, gross, don't love me. Fight through that and affirm their personal journey through these awkward years. And then when they finally reach high school, the last 4 years where maybe your influence in their life will be maybe at its greatest, your role is to mobilize their potential. Because your kid, I know it, has a lot of potential. And I know you probably see it more than anybody else. And so your role is to help them mobilize that, to help them see it in themselves and move them to what is next. So last week we talked about how you can have 936 weeks with your kid from the time they are born until they graduate high school. And we talked about how maybe some of your jars looks like this. And maybe you did the math and said, oh, I only have 237 weeks left. This week's homework is to pay attention to what is changing in your child right now. Pay attention to what phase they're in. Think about the question that they are asking. And then ask yourself the question, what can I do to rediscover them now?